Good morning. Today is December 16th, 2019. This is Clear Passage Prayer Line. I just want to make a distinction between foolish and fools. We all do foolish things at different points in time. So everybody has been foolish. But a fool is someone that repeatedly goes and keeps doing the same thing over and over again, and you talking to you blue in the face, and you praying and talking, and they keep getting in the same situations. And so reason I'm saying that is it's important when we're praying. All of us, we're going to pray for wisdom today, because wisdom is the food of kings. It's the thing that you will be able to run an effective kingdom in, and you got to have it. But we're going to talk about characteristics. So this is probably one of the most important. I know I said that a lot the last few weeks, but this is probably one of the most important messages I've ever given, because without understanding this, you will be pouring very important, precious oil and information into a container that is corroded at the bottom, and the stuff just goes right through and it doesn't hold, doesn't stick. The wisdom you're pouring in and the giving and the prayer is not sticking because the container is a fool. And that's why you have to know what you're praying for. You have to pray for that thing. You have to pray for it just like it's a disease. So we're going to talk about that. Some things that have been happening culturally that have harmed us as a people. Some foolish behavior that we have that is tearing down the very core of family structures in America and communities of color. But in America as a whole, we now have treated the covenant of marriage in a very lackadaisical way. So we don't have the strength of that covenant as a regular part of a society. People do it, but it's not with the same consecration that it's supposed to have. So as a result of this not having that in place, children are raised with a lot of spiritual properties and oppression that they have to almost fend for themselves. And they didn't used to have to do that. You have grandma, you have just family households, instead of the mother and the father consecrated before God and strong in a union in and of themselves, so that God can take those two out to the next level, to the next step, because they themselves are standing and wax strong in the Lord. That's how it was supposed to be. That's not what we have. And then we have music that just completely spews out in the accompanied by rhythm and music and tone. You have foolish statements that are going into the psyche of children, teenagers, young adults, and they're practicing, they're learning, they're practicing foolishness. It's just there is things that defile the Lord, defile the name of the Lord, that say crazy stuff about the things that God would treasure. They glorify evil and hate good. That's just going out on the airways on a regular basis. So that's foolishness, is being just a regular. You turn on a song and you might like the beat, but the music, the words are going into your psyche. Is very important, because your mind will accept it as a fact. If you keep saying it and your ears keep hearing it, your mind will go. And if you don't know to discern what's what, your mind will receive it. You hear on television, airways, you hear foolishness. So how can they not be? Because we haven't incorporated wisdom as a part of our, which is a gift of our, by being which is a gift by being in or associated with the kingdom. Even if you don't live in heaven, if you live next to it, close to it, you still benefit from the aroma that fumes from it. You still benefit because you're close to it. Just like you live in a house with a saved individual, you are covered because you're part of their household. Not that you did anything to earn it, but you're covered by being part of the household. So what wisdom is, wisdom does a couple of things. It gives you knowledge, and it gives you knowledge, and it gives you understanding of the knowledge, and you operate in it. But wisdom initially tears down foolishness. It goes and hunts out and pulls down foolish behavior, foolish conversation, identifies a fool. You gotta identify a fool. And I'm not saying it in a bad way, but if you're praying for somebody and they are a fool, who is a fool? A fool is a criminal. A fool is somebody that thinks lies are okay, and they can operate in lies, and they think that their sin is hidden and they're not seen. A fool is somebody that thinks that God is real, or that is not afraid of God. That's a fool. A fool is somebody that speaks abomination. And reason I say you have to say, when I say foolish is an event, and everybody, we've all done foolish stuff. It's just part of just growing up. And when I say growing up, you're going to be growing up until you're 90. You're learning, you're growing up. So we've all done foolish things, but to stay in it and to waddle in it and keep repeating the same thing and to not be able to get a wise thought in there and change behavior, that is what a definition of a fool. A fool is somebody that will manufacture a curse because of their behavior. Write that down. A fool is somebody that will manufacture a curse because of their own behavior and then whine about it and say, look, whoa, look what happened to me. And you can see, if you keep sticking your hand down there and hitting it with the hammer, yeah, it's going to hurt. If you keep doing it, and it keeps going, oh, why does this keep hurting? You can't even talk to them. You just look at them like they're crazy. But you see patterns of behavior that keep repeating themselves. That is a fool, which is different than somebody being in bondage. Being in bondage means when you are under the oppression of evil. Evil people are foolish, but they have sometimes this is in warfare. If you don't identify it, you won't be able to come at it the way it needs to be come at. You won't be able to respond. What does wisdom do? You have to have wisdom to run a kingdom. You have to have wisdom to get wealth, because you have to have enough sense to know what to do with it. You have to know when to harvest. Foolish people are lazy, Lazy. Foolish people, that's the 10 virgins, the ones that had the oil and ones that didn't. Foolish people will do just enough to get over. Wise people will think past that and say, what if? And maybe I need to do a little extra, and let me do this and let me do that. And they're prudent about their behavior. They think ahead. They get extra. They'll bring the extra water, bring the extra this. They're thinking around the situation on what needs to happen. They're good watchmen. They pay attention. I sent something to Alina last week from one of our meetings, and it was anyway, I won't go into detail, but she researches everything. So she looked it up and said, nope, because it was an obvious reason. I can't go into detail, but it was an obvious reason. But again, wisdom, look, pay attention. It's going to save you a lot of time to go and look and see before you just say, oh, and you can, while you want to do a thing, you have to still do everything according to what the Lord you have to be diligent. You have to look. You watchmen, pay attention. When you see change, pay attention. Discernment, pay attention. Discernment is a part of wisdom. Okay, so what happens is foolishness. If you have to establish. Fools die early. Sometimes they get lucky, but when I say they die early, because they keep walking back on the freeway. You can get them over to the side. Don't walk into traffic. Stay over here. They'll get to talking or get to do something and will, without thought, walk right back into the line of danger. And this is where you have to have those abrupt conversations. This is where you have to have the pay attention. You know how you have to clap your hands in front of somebody and tell them to look? You're trying to tell them something. This is because they're that wandering, can't pay attention, can't focus. That's dangerous. It's okay if you're down on the ground, but when you start operating with high level strategies or high level discussions, or you're in spiritual warfare, you can't be in spiritual warfare taking on the attributes of being foolish, because you'll get killed. You'll get literally and figuratively and every other kind of way in trouble. Okay. So Daniel, one of the things we talked about with Daniel is he got understanding and wisdom, get wisdom, and then with all that getting, he says get understanding. Understanding means it goes into the machinery of your mind. You understand why. And when you get the understanding, that's what keeps you from sinning. because the logic and the wisdom of God will pull you back. Oh, I don't want to do that, because if I do that, then. If you can't do it out of fear, and but the logic of this thing is going to kill me, or this thing is going to take me out of here, or this thing will have this effect. However you need to get to the behavior, wisdom will stop. Wisdom will stop you. And if you can't do it out of sheer obedience to the Lord, or to your parents, if you have wise parents, if you can't listen to them, then you have to get the understanding on your own. And sometimes a couple of trial runs will teach you. But this is the thing about wisdom, your mind. If there is an addiction, then your body is fighting your mind. Your mind might say, no, I don't need to do that, or whatever, or eat that, or do that, whatever it is. But your body is what's out of control, and that's where you have to put the discipline in. And so that's working its way out. Now, what we mean by that is, if you are using wisdom, will tell you to get assistance. Wisdom will help you to not go to the edge where that becomes a problem, to keep you out, it keeps you out of the way. So when I say keeps you out of the way, it keeps you from going in the vicinity of. So that's where you have the it will keep you from. And then when I say that, because they accused Jesus of all kind of stuff, and he was not. He was all about his Father's business. So I'm not talking about religious behavior. I'm talking about when you are operating in inequity, operating in inequity, and then wondering why the outcome doesn't come out differently. You're taking the steps. If you are listening to gossip, if you are operating with that level of deceit, or if you're around anybody that does. If someone is gossiping, what they're doing while they're yet talking on the phone, they are weaving a curse in their lives, in their kingdom, in those around them. They're creating a curse. If you are designing evil for somebody else, you might as well be sitting there with some knitting needles and knit the curse, because you're doing it for somebody. You're doing it for yourself. When it comes out your mouth crazy, you are putting it right into your life cycle. You're putting it into the future. You're putting it into your own situation. So that's why you don't put your mouth on other people, and that is why you don't devise. You don't sit and do wickedness. Wicked people are foolish, but they're doing it with the vengeance. They're operating in foolishness with zeal. And maybe they think they can beat the consequences, but I don't know why they do it. But the thing is, they don't fear God, and they don't think that the chickens come home to roost. And it says, as a man soweth, so woman too, as a man soweth, so shall he or she reap. That's real. That is absolutely real. And so sometimes when we say criminals are foolish, because it says clearly what you can or can't do, and then they'll do it and just sit like nothing's going to happen. Just like get in a grenade, pulling the spring out of the grenade, and then sitting on the grenade, and then acting like everything's okay. Yes, it's going to blow up. It's going to blow up at some point in time. I can't give you the exact second, but you have created something that's going to explode in your life. And then you wonder why it happened. But then they go back and do it again in this cycle. So if you look at this, everybody get somebody in your mind that you see keeps doing the same thing, and then you have defined that cycle of what foolishness is. And it is foolishness versus fool. I don't know which one, but but pay attention, because that's where you have to pray. You don't pray a blessing onto a fool. You can't, because they can't take it. You do rescue. You do a 9/11 rescue. You do the rescue part in the prayer. When I say rescue, I mean in the prayer realm, you pray for the foolishness to stop. You pray for them to get wisdom, and you do some, but you only can do to the degree that they can receive it. You have to because you can rescue, and if they're foolish, it may not even be a full amount of days, hours. They'll be back into that same situation. If anybody's worked with abused women, abused situations, or family violence or whatever, you can go and get her. You can pack up their stuff and bring them out. But there's such an addiction to the trauma, an addiction to the dysfunction of the relationship that if the person themselves doesn't get better, they will return to the same situation because it's familiar and comfortable, not that it's healthy. And then eventually the abusive person could even wind up killing them, and they stayed there. I don't know, and that's what and I know we've all seen those types of situations where they keep going back and you can't get them to stop. And so that's when I talk about food, that's what I'm saying. It goes beyond, and you can feel sorry for them, and it's an addiction, and it's all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, the Lord provides a way of escape. And at some point in time, they got to love God first, then themselves, so that they can stand up and walk out and do whatever is necessary. That happens with children when everybody all the kids want to play, and there's homework to be done. The wise ones are going to sit down and do their homework. The foolish ones are going to go outside and play, try to run back and cram for the test and not get a good grade, and then not figure out why. They just do the actual thing to create the F, the D or the F, and then can't figure out why they got the D or the F because they didn't study. Because they didn't sit there and do the homework like everybody else was supposed to do. They didn't have the discipline to do what was supposed to be done. It's not like it's a mystery. It's things that are put in place. And the other factor that I was going to say on the foolish side is try to avoid taking a shortcut if you can. Because once you have to actually, sometimes you get a break and the Lord just, gets you right to the front of the line and all that wonderful stuff happens. But sometimes walk it. Just do the whole walk so you can figure it out so that you can get yourself in a situation where you get it. Sometimes you have to just I used to park at the end of the parking lot and walk. When I felt like I had been, was getting too high on my weight or anything like that or whatever, I would walk. I would say, no, you're going to walk. And I would tell myself, you're going to walk. And I would park at the end of the parking lot and walk all the way up and walk all the way back because just to create the situation so that I can make sure I got my steps in. But the thing about it is now overeaters, great example. It's a cycle. They get upset and then they eat, and then they eat, and after the effects of the eating, they get upset again and they eat. Or they drink, or they use drugs, or they do whatever. But it's a cycle, and that's where that's foolish behavior. It doesn't mean that the person is a fool, but that's foolish behavior. You have to break that because wisdom, your wealth, all the things that you're going to want to do are at the other side of you not feeding your flesh, at the other side of you not feeding into the bad behavior. And that's for you on your own to know if God tells you to get up in the morning 2 or 3 or whatever time he wakes you up to prayer, go here early and get there early or do whatever, be about it. Do it. That there's a reason, there's a distinctive reason in behavior that successful people, and it's a very small percentage because we're not farmers anymore, so people, well, not a lot of people are, but you don't have to get up and plant a crop and get out and water milk the cows, get the eggs. You don't have to do all this stuff to eat, and so it's made convenient, and as a result of it, we just have a sense of entitlement, like it's just going to fall out the sky. But what a farmer does, and a vineyard owner of a vineyard, et cetera, which you've heard me say before, or somebody that mines our pans for gold. There is a muscle activity attached to a reward, and they're clearly aware of the value of that activity. They know if they have to mine for it, so they start thinking differently because you have to go get it. There's a training in having to go get it to make it happen. Kids, I think every child should work. In junior high or high school, they should get a job so they can learn customer service. They can learn how to operate in public. They can learn how to, manners. You can teach the manners at home, but when they get out there and start seeing how ill-mannered so many people are, it makes them appreciate, and that it helps them develop their skills, their social skills. It helps them figure out how to function and how to recognize all the stuff you've been teaching them. They now get a chance to experiment and see how it really works. And not only do they get a chance to see how it really works, they get a chance to come back home and say, thank you, Mom, for teaching me manners, or thank you for that, or whatever it is. But they get to see why you have spent the time teaching them and training them in the way that they should go. And that's important. When we say foolish, and now with the definition of foolish, you can have access to all of that and still disregard it. You can have access and still decide to go crazy, still decide to go to error. You can have all the food, all the wisdom, all the delicacies that's in Proverbs. You can have all that sitting in front of you and still step over that to do something crazy. That's a fool. Okay, so you must identify who and what you're praying over. Foolishness is a temporary act. A fool is somebody that puts it into permanent practice and does it with the diligence and keeps doing it, and then whines when they get the result that they work so hard to get. They work so hard to get the result, and then when they get it, they go, "Oh, look at what happened to me." So they're either in rebellion they either being rebellious or they're a victim. They vacillate between, I'm gonna do what I want to do, but can't nobody tell me. Now, rebellion just means you refuse to learn. You keep going into intentionally doing the wrong thing when you have been warned. That's what rebellion. You just keep going back in it. And so rebellion, and then after they get all the knocked upside the head, then they come over here, woe is me, poor me, poor me. That's right there is a vicious cycle between rebellion and victim. And then if you sitting there praying over it, you wind up you got to pay attention where to catch that situation. The reason I say that is you have to catch it and call it out, or else you're going to be part of the cycle called a codependent. You're going to be there helping them, trying to talk to them when they're rebellion, and then rescuing them on the victim side. When the effect kicks in, then you are trying to rescue. You can do that but so often, and then your life is intertwined with somebody else's foolish behavior, and you're stuck. It doesn't matter how many times you hear it, if you're stuck. So I remember talking to someone very close to me, and they had kicked their husband out, kicked him out, and then called me crying because he left. I was like, I'm not going to do this. You're not going to waste my time. You sat there and threatened and kicked him out, called him out his name. And then when he left, she called me crying because he left and said, well, I didn't think he was really going to leave. You see how women do that all the time. Men do it too, but women are good for doing it. Doing something, want a different outcome, but what's coming out your mouth is not what you really want to have happen. But you can't say what you really want. You want somebody to guess it and then to fix it for you and then jump in there and do it. That is called being like a spoiled child. If you can't even define what it is you're trying to get to, how are people going to come together and the truth be discussed so we can get to some real answers? We can't get to some real answers when people plan. And that happens all the time. So and so she said that. She said, and he left. And he was able, and he stayed going. They still married. He stayed going. But because she could never come back. Oh, this is another thing. When you can't apologize, if you can tear somebody down and talk about them, you ought to be able to apologize with the same amount of vigor. If you can call people out their name, run them down, and you can't eat humble pie and come back and apologize, you don't have no business saying nothing you can't back up out of. If you can't apologize to them, then you don't need to open your mouth and say nothing. If you can criticize them, you should be able to compliment them and apologize. That goes together. And if not, keep your mouth shut and just be kind all the way through. That fruit of the Spirit. That's where it kicks in. But if people are good for talking up something, and then when it's found to be wrong or they have misspoken, parents do it all the time. They criticize kids, and then when the kids actually turned out to have said the truth or been right, the parents won't come back and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I accused you of this," or "I'm sorry." That counts a lot. That counts. That's called integrity. That's called integrity on yourself. I apologize. I misspoke. I misjudged. I did whatever it is. But pride, and arrogance, and these are characteristics of foolish people. Pay attention. When you're not going to go into business with nobody like that, because they can't have a civil conversation. That ego is going to jump up. They're going to be talking out the side of their neck when they're not supposed to be doing that. They can't see, because foolish people can't see facts, because there's something inside of their ego of how they assimilate information. Somebody that's criminal behavior, somebody that is cheating, steal, any of that works of the flesh, there's a criminal element in there. There's a twist. Something's twisted. Something's not working. If something's not working, you need to pay attention, because their behavior is going to keep okay. A foolish person has a foolish event. A fool manufactures a curse. A fool manufactures a curse in their life. They will find a way to mess themselves up. Every time. They'll find a way to do it. They just won't do it right. It can be one of those situations where it's a trust factor. You get a piece of pie, put the amount, it's $1.50, put it in the box, because the person's not at the counter. The fool's going to go, "Oh, I got me a free piece of pie." But in person of integrity, because they know God is watching, and if they know God is watching, and they just know they don't want to mess up their blessing, they're going to make sure they're going to put $2 in there and give them a tip. They're going to make sure to do the right thing, because there's always somebody, "Oh, yeah. See how I always tell you somebody watching heaven. Once you're aware that heaven is watching, you act accordingly. That's wisdom. But a fool's like, "I could get away with it. Nobody's watching. I'll do whatever I want to do, and I'm just gonna." And they do it in marriages. They do it in relationships. They do it at work. They do it all the time. They're gonna get away with it. They're gonna get one up on something. That's the difference. So in that process, if you are paying, don't do business, don't do any. People have to get wisdom, and they have to really be seeking after God. If they are not, that's like giving a 2-year-old a big giant, keys to a Lamborghini. They're going to kill themselves, and you participated because you knew better. So you have to know what is going on and what you're actually dealing with. And foolishness, sin, fools create curses, and sin makes people become foolish. It's a cycle. It works together. Okay, so we're getting ready to read our scriptures, and the get wisdom and get understanding. Understanding means you know why. You go past just doing it, following the rules. It means you have gone to a point where you understand the why it came to be, how it came to, how the thing, the origin of it. Why is facts? You can relate facts. Like you can just say, I'm just using this because I just saw this. The Hoover Dam holds so much water, this much, how much cement it caused, Or you can just say the Hoover Dam holds back water. The understanding is when you understand why it's holding back water, what it's doing, what benefit it's putting into the whole ecosystem over in that area, what it's actually doing. So the same thing with sin. When you spend time understanding, you don't steal because, you don't use cursing out of your mouth because, you don't operate in anger because, and then when you start understanding the because of it, what it creates for you is an opportunity for you to actually, it solidifies what you're doing. It solidifies why you won't do it. Wisdom is when you use it in leadership, when you use it in any process, you screen out fools. Goodness, you know them. I can't even begin. But you know, and it has nothing to do with race or economic background, because we've seen very wealthy people, and so you guys are thinking of a name right now, but don't say it, don't write it down. But you see very wealthy people, very powerful people, and they speak and they say things and you just can't believe they said that. That's foolishness, fool. You just leave it. You can't, if you don't work with the core makeup of how that person gets to those decisions and what they can say and what their ego will force them to say, this is where you pray. How do you pray for a fool? You have to pray that you have to break down and pray for the wisdom. You have to pray for them to get wisdom before you start praying for the fix. You can get a temporary fix, but you pray for wisdom. You start speaking to them in terms, if you are able to communicate with this particular, whoever the people are that you're praying for. Some people we're praying for, we don't ever have contact with them, but you still pray for wisdom. You pray, and wisdom may start out with small little seeds. Humility is a big part of wisdom. Because a fool has said in his heart, there is no God. That ego then jumped up and went crazy. But humility recognizes there is a God, and I have to honor him. There is a God. I have to honor him. Rahab wasn't Jewish, but she had enough sense to say, I believe your God's getting ready to do thus and so. Abigail had enough sense to run out before Nabal and save the village. And she did it with haste. She understood the situation and ran in and did whatever was necessary to save her people. Esther, and I keep naming a lot of women. Esther went in and went before the king, and it was risky, but she didn't have any choices. She put herself on the line. Wisdom is humility. Wisdom will cause you to be humble and speak. Even if you're talking to a foolish person about a foolish situation, wisdom will come and knit the pieces together. Wisdom is a peacemaker. Wisdom will figure out, try to understand what's happening and bring peace to the situation. Wisdom, before it walks in the room, will ask God to give him or her the words to say to bring this thing together. Wisdom will have understanding of what everybody needs to have happen and figure out how to make the thing happen. Wisdom creates bridges instead of blowing stuff up. Wisdom gets everybody fed. Wisdom has them sit down and let's turn these fishes and loaves, and feed everybody. Wisdom collects the 12 baskets up because there's a use for that as well. Wisdom is efficient. It doesn't waste. It figures out multiple uses for things. It's very, it can take a dime and stretch it. Wisdom. Wisdom is prudent. It makes everybody look good, not just themselves. Wisdom compliments. It uses words that build up, that edify. Wisdom is a grower. A wise woman builds her house. A foolish woman tears it down. Wisdom uses words that build up and give life, because those words will still be working in the background when you've gone on to your next project. They will say, I remember this. I remember when you told me that. And while they may not get it all at once, they will eventually get it. Wisdom will give you the time to where wisdom will cause the foolish to stop being fools. There's many men God has paired many wise women with foolish men. And if that woman is anchored in the Lord and strong and fortified in God, she can help turn that situation around, and vice versa. One can win the other one over. Wisdom, words, wisdom, not browbeating them, but with wisdom and prayer, fervent prayer. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. Fervent prayer. But you got to know what you're praying for. When you are looking at a fool, you have to pray that fool off of them. You have to pray that foolishness off of them. You are praying for them to become wise. You're praying for wisdom, and some of that is just in prayer. And if you have the opportunity and the privilege of speaking to them, you got to make sure that when you start speaking to them, the word of God is coming through your conversation. Wisdom. Fools have fools for friends. Trust me. If you got a fool that you're talking to, you look at the friends, the whole cluster of them. Because it's a whole cluster. They all want to be just as stupid as the other one. If you bring them over and look at them, like, oh my God, now I see what happened. You talking to these? You want your your spouse, you want your friends, you want your children, you want your relatives. You want people to have wise friends. Wise friends. The worst thing they'll do is keep them from going over the edge, but the better thing to do is to rub off on them. Wise starts rubbing off, wisdom starts rubbing, and the foolish people start becoming wiser. So you have to look at bad company. Is it called bad company corrupts? I can't think of what that word is, but they do. You can train your child and give them all the etiquette in the world, and they get around he mongers, just crazy heathens, and then you wonder what happened. Where's your napkin? Do you wipe your mouth? What are you doing with food? Talking with food in your mouth? Where'd you get this cursing from? Who are you? That's bring you right back. I got to go to your school. Who are you hanging out with? And who are the parents of who you're hanging out with? And etiquette has nothing to do with economic situation. That should be something that's taught in schools all the time. Etiquette, manners, good behavior, wisdom, Saturday classes. It should they should be that you can create a community that wants to be smart, not just a couple of families. You can create, I have to, and I don't know if it's the best thing or not, but when you see, you see, I'm just going to say it. If you have hooch mama mamas, these baby mamas, with having children and more, 5, however many, daddy for every baby, that right there, before that thing gets out of control, as a woman of God, you need to be praying and talking to her, because something's going on. But the problem is in her foolishness, in her lack of self-integrity, and her need, and her needs, the neediness, and all the whatever got her there. She is creating life and she's creating life with foolishness. In her foolishness, she's creating life, and those babies don't deserve that kind of behavior. So then you have to have a conversation. You absolutely have to have a conversation. You do have to take Sister Girl under, if you are exposed to her, if you see her, you got to take Sister Girl under your wing, and you need to have that conversation. How do you dress? You want a gentleman, but you dressing like, no, that's not how that works. And you have to have that conversation. And it is important. You know what will happen is they'll start respecting you. They'll start talking to you a certain way, and they'll start respecting you, and then they will start to actually to emulate you, because you're making a difference. But you have to build up, and then you have to, what you got to go back and look at? Who was her parents? Most of the time they weren't there. Somebody wasn't there. There was something fell through the cracks, and you have a person that got older but did not grow up. They got older, but they did not grow up. They did not get all the things that they needed. They didn't get the training that they needed. They didn't get the home that they needed, so that when it came time for them to go out into the world, they weren't prepared. And they didn't even know they weren't prepared because their mama wasn't prepared. So you have generations of foolish behavior. You have generations of ignorance. I'm telling you, this is what the body of Christ is supposed to be doing. That holiness before God, the concept of holiness before God by itself will create you a wonderful individual. If you get that holiness and consecration before God, following what's in the Word of God, by itself will create a masterpiece individual. This Word of God will create a masterpiece, because their integrity and the trust and the ethics and the character, sanctification, the watching of the Word, the fruit of the Spirit, it's all in there. Everything you need outside of the outside, the exterior, the dress and all that stuff, but everything else you need is right in there. It's in there, from how to put your family together, how to behave in public, how to treat the altar, how to treat the house of God, how to become wealthy. It's all in this Word. It's all there, and that is why the children in the house of God, we're supposed to be the wiser of the community. We're supposed to be emulating things, putting plans together, putting solutions together, coming up with things that are going to help other people thrive, don't even get me started on what church is supposed to be doing to educate the communities. No, now you might have one generation might slip through the cracks, but this 2 and 3 generations, no, that's not even people. That's a reflection on the house of God. That's a reflection on what the people of God have been doing with this word out in that community. What have we been doing? This word out in that community. Have you been applying it? No. Are your parishioners going to college? Why not? Why not? What's going on? Are they all waddling around 50, 60 pounds overweight? Why? Where's the educational component? Why do we have the majority of people in churches with high blood pressure and they get mad when you tell them to stop eating bacon? I eat bacon, but I don't eat it every day. I mean, I don't do this every day. What is it? Why do they get mad when you start talking about they're eating food to self-medicate, and they will crucify you if you go in a church talking about a healthy eating plan. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear about no vegetables. And the cakes keep coming out from the back kitchen. We don't even need to go there. But when we talk about wisdom, we need to be real about what that actually is. We need to be real about the poisoning yourself in sugar, and then you got everybody over here praying for you, and your knees are swollen up, and your legs and ankles are swollen up, but you keep shoveling in the sugar. I know you don't want to hear this, but this is the problem. This is one of the situations when we talk about wisdom and we talk about health and people dying from high blood pressure, but they still putting the food in. They self-medicating because they're frustrated, and they frustrated because we haven't gotten to the core of the issue. We don't talk. Nobody says this is how that we know we need to have marriage classes. I mean, it's all kind of things that are happening in church that don't have to happen. My people perish for lack of knowledge. Perish, not die. Perish, yes, die, perish for lack of knowledge. So we're getting ready to talk about foolishness, and when we start praying, you have got to pray. The wisdom is the container that's going to hold. Wisdom is the container that's going to hold the blessing. And if you don't receive it with wisdom, you will not hold the blessing. The blessing will pass right through your hands and fall to the ground. And I'm not having it. It's not going to never happen twice. You got to pay attention. Lord, I do not want to be a fool. I do not want to be foolish. I do not want to miss my blessing. I don't want to get my blessing and can't hold my blessing because I don't have enough sense in wisdom, the foundation of wisdom in my life where I can keep a blessing. Do you understand? I want to keep the blessing. I don't want to just watch it go by, come in and go. I need the whole blessing. So you want to accumulate wealth, you have to start with accumulating a blessing. And that means you got to say a definite yes to some stuff, and you got to say a definite no to some stuff. That's wisdom, very defined marks, not this muddled up in between, lukewarm, okie dokie, I'm going to slip and slide on it. That's not what that is. It's got to be a definite yes and a definite no. It's all the way in, it's all the way out. Wisdom, yes to the things of God and no to the things of the enemy, and stay out from that middle stuff. Okay, so let's get the scriptures in here real fast. The reason I said that is because when you're praying for people, you have to stop and pray, Lord, let me pray wisdom first. And then you can tell people all the time, I'm praying for you to get wisdom. And when you get wisdom, then you'll be able to stay blessed. Because if you look at people's lives, just look at them and see what's going on. And the strand, the vein of food, where that comes through, then you can, okay, hold on. I hope you guys can hear me now. The vein of foolishness is what you have to stop and pray and get an understanding on. And that can happen from having conversations with the enemy and having whatever the behavior, whatever it is, having conversations with where the enemy has gotten a part of their behavior and a part of their life, and that thing, you have to pray that thing. Once you can identify the core, get to the core. This is why we spend time in prayer on people. Get to the core. And then when the Lord shows you where the core issue is that has to come out, that's the thing you pray for. Don't pray for all the other stuff. If you're praying for a fool, and you got to call it what it is. If you're praying for a fool, then the foolishness got to go before you can get the other stuff in there, because it won't stay. You can take a person out of a situation, put them in a perfectly healthy situation, and they will recreate the dysfunction because they're comfortable with it. So you can't, the person has to change, because wherever they go, they with themselves. Where you can be sad, if you're trying to get even with somebody and they're foolish, you don't have to worry about them, because wherever they go, they are with themselves, and that's the issue right there. That's the curse. They are the curse. So you don't have to worry about them messing up. They will be the mess up, but if you put them in there, it's going to all mess, because they're there, because they are it. So you yourself be the wisdom, be the knowledge, be the fruit of the Spirit. That's why that stuff is so important. Be the understanding, be the love, be that thing that God would have you to be. You will shine. You will shine like polished gold. You'll be so appreciated. The wisdom of God, the blessing, the fruit of the Spirit, and that stuff rubs off. And you can't play with crazy people. When I'm trying to tell you that you talk nice and all that stuff, but when you're looking at crazy, you better identify that, just like you identify a demon. You have to identify that thing. Look, and it's hard. Dysfunction is a real stronghold. You need to say, you need to identify what it is that you are trying to say and what you're trying not to do. So hold on one second. Let me see who this